it would be interesting to explore the question of relationships. What is really behind what make people want to have relationships, create a couple, have friends, have children? It seems obvious that we often seek safety in the feeling of being loved, but it seems that this search often creates a lot of psychological suffering. So what are the main differences between our current way of dealing with our relationships and those of individuals adjusted to reality?
Okay. Relationships, the need for relationships is fundamental. It's like breathing. It's like the need, the hunger is the same thing. It's fundamental. It's a fundamental need. The problem is that it is filtered by inferior consciousness through programs, through automatisms that creates more suffering than bliss. And that's the problem, actual problem with human beings on this planet, is that the consciousness is not sufficiently adjusted to systemic reality. And until it becomes adjusted to systemic reality individually, individuals are going to suffer psychologically from that need, that fundamental need, which they interpret through the need for love and need for affection and need for all kinds of things like that, you see. And that's what creates the suffering, because where there is love, there is hate, you see. When somebody doesn't give the love that another person seeks, he will hate that person eventually, and that creates the suffering, individual suffering of life, of relationships. See, because the people are not aware of what's really going on. So.
So you're saying that the love we are taking for love is not actual love.
Well,
that's pluralized.
Yeah, the word love is charged with emotions, with with memory, okay, and the memory is from from an inferior consciousness. It's an egregore, okay, and that memory, like I just said, is stacked with inferior consciousness. It's influenced by. So that's why people interpret their feelings for someone else like that. And that's what starts the whole thing, you see. They can't sustain that. Nobody can sustain or be at the level other people want them to be, you see, because it stems from programs of abandonment and rejection. So the person needs to the affection of other, the attention of the other, and tries to control that. So when he loses control, then he suffers from it. So it's an inferior way of relating to others, or filling that relationship need that we all have.
So you mean that people are not aware that when they try to love someone, when they try to express their feeling and all, behind it there is the need for security, the need for non-rejection.
Yeah, exactly. So they don't know the mechanism, the mechanism of multidimensional mechanism, the vibratory mechanism. So they don't know what's behind it. So they at the mercy of an inferior consciousness, which stems from collective consciousness and collective authority. You see. So the person doesn't know. So when you don't know something, you can't solve it. See, they're not aware. They're not awakened to that reality. People only live that inferior involutive consciousness. That is to say. Unconscious or perception of reality.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So why do people not realize that they don't understand their own system?
Because they can't see it. They're not in their own authority. They are in the authority of collective consciousness, of what influenced them to have the identity that they have today. You see, and they realize. They don't realize, but they feel that they're always searching for their identity. You see, they have collective identity, or the identity that the collective gives them. You see, but they don't have individual identity. In other words, they live from, or they act from collective authority, but they don't have enough or any authority by themselves. You see, it's only when you can observe multidimensionally that you start having some kind of authority, because multidimensional observation helps you to observe that invisible reality, which is the fifth dimension and all the dimensions. See, or what's going on, what's really going on. See, in the whole.
Mm-hmm. So it seems to access this multidimensional psychology, it needs to be informed about all these links that we can see, but also it takes a lot of practice to get used to it, and it doesn't come just like this.
Well, of course.
Mm-hmm.
One has to experiment it. One has to be informed of it before it starts being in. But then you have a very strong resistance from an inferior consciousness, from psychological consciousness, which man is used to relying on for his security. And it creates a resistance. Even if someone wants to evolve, doesn't mean because he has some kind of information, he can overcome that authority and start developing his own authority. You see, he has to first observe what the resistance or the habits he has, or the automatism of looking at things through his psychological consciousness, or observing through his psychological consciousness, before he starts really developing his own authority through observation. It's only when you observe something by yourself, or you're observing in a multidimensional way by yourself, that you start being aware, where it's not knowledge anymore, it's facts. You see? You experiment it. You're like a scientist experimenting the experiments of others. You see? Or if you invent something, or you discover something, others will confirm your experiment. Same thing. And you will confirm your own experiment through repetition. See? You will observe it and re-observe it, and it will be overwhelming at a certain point. So then the person, it's not a question of belief, it's a question of being aware, of observing the fact, observing reality. You see, observing how we are subjected to programs and automatisms and all that. See, and collective influence.
Sorry.
And collective influence.
So it seems it's pretty much like a scientific approach, but why scientific can't arrive to that point, since it's still the capacity to observe things and to verify things, and scientific are doing it since a long time. So why aren't they able to do the same?
Because they are because they are observing matter. They're not observing the invisible. See? They're not observing consciousness, or what's behind consciousness, what creates consciousness, and what changes consciousness, and what is the quality of consciousness. They're observing atoms, you see, and the likes of it. So, or something else, chemistry or whatever. That's one kind of observation, but it's an observation from the science community today. It's a psychological observation of a very high nature, but it's still psychological. You see, it doesn't take. It doesn't. What I mean by psychological, it doesn't take it doesn't take the invisible or the vibratory part in context of their research. In other words, these scientists are not awakened. They're not awakened to that reality. You see, to the multi-dimensional reality. See what I mean?
I see. Yes, I see. So, to come back to the theme of the day, once you developed this capacity of observation, multidimensional observation, what is your relationship with others? What's the difference? What does that change for you?
What does it change for a person to be able to observe in a multi-dimensional way? Well, actually, it creates your identity. It creates your own authority. What you should have, actually. You're not fragmented anymore. People are fragmented between their real identity and their collective identity, or what the collective authority gives them as an identity. In other words, if a person is not in his identity, that means he's subjected to what to the judgment of others and all that. In other words, his way of living life is has to go through the collective filter. In other words, the moral filter, the moral authority, all kinds of authority. So he always acts through or make movements through because of the judgment of others. So you can't go against that. If he goes against that, then he feels guilty, he suffers psychologically. That's the problem, you see, with that.
Yes, I see. The question was more directed towards the relationships that you get when you have this new capacity of observation. What is the quality of your relationships then?
Well, you have to build the quality of your relationship. You have to create that from both persons. You see, in other words, both persons have to be sufficiently awakened or aware of that reality to be able to apply it in their own lives and through their relationship with the other person. In other words, it's based on intelligence. It's based on not the knowledge, but the reality or the vibratory multidimensional reality. See? Then you know what's going on. You appreciate your relationship with others. You're not in love with others. See? Love is blind. What people can call love, they have to live it blindly. They can't love someone who, it's funny, but they can't love someone they don't appreciate. Funny. I say? They have to have some quality according to their principle of love. See? I don't love somebody because he's bad, because he's something else. You see? Because he doesn't act at the level of my principles or my consciousness, whatever. You see? Of my conception of love. And that creates problems, you see? But at the other level, when two persons are awakened or sufficiently awakened, they build their relationship. They are conscious that they have to build their relationship. In other words, to appreciate each other, they have to have some qualities. If they don't have those qualities, then they can't fall in love. You see? It's not that they do, but I use that term, they can't. It's not dependent on memory. It's dependent on consciousness. Not the same thing. It's dependent on our capacity to observe, multidimensionally observe. See? It's not because what people live psychologically is based on memory. It's based on programs, automatisms. People have no idea, they talk about love and things like that, but they have no idea that it's purely mechanical.
Yes,
they're like robots, but they can't mix. You see, they can't mix the two. They can't see the two. You see, they believe that because they have a perception of the fundamental need. You see, that they ignore. They don't know what it is. You see. And they interpret everything, but it stems from automatisms, it stems from programs. It's not, the need for love, the need for affection in the way they live it, It stems from the lack of, or the fear of being abandoned. See?
Mm-hmm. So you're saying that these very fundamental programs that we all have as human beings actually are being interpreted as love, but they aren't actually. They just are programs that activate themselves all the time because we are really unaware of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
okay.
You can call them fundamental programs. Okay, just like to breed is a fundamental program. It's automatism, and the need to eat is fundamental. It's a program, but it's fundamental. It's adjusted to reality, to the system. See, but people interpret that. You see, for relationships and all that, they interpret it through their inferior consciousness. You see, psychological consciousness. So people have a hard time, realizing that they are living an inferior consciousness. Even if they're seeking to evolve, they have a hard time admitting that they are using inferior consciousness. It's funny.
Mm-hmm. By that you're meaning that they continue interpreting what love is through their old way of thinking.
Yeah.
That's what you mean?
Yeah.
But
so
they
can never...
They think that love is fundamental and beautiful as they live it.
Yeah, and they can never attain it permanently. That's the difference. You see, two individuals who are sufficiently adjusted to reality or the system and all that, how it works, will create a relationship, will appreciate each other. You see? So it's permanent. If people can do that, create that, it doesn't fade away. You see, because they create it. That's the big difference. Then they appreciate each other, and they can't separate themselves. It's absolute. They can't. They're like this, because why should they separate themselves from the other person? Why should they separate or delete the relationship? There's no reason to. See? They have all the reasons to keep building up the relationship or constructing the relationship. People are married for 20, 30 years and they don't have relationships. They think they have, but they never constructed their relationship. That's what I mean. See? That's the problem. And then they can't communicate. If they can't communicate, where is the relationship? There's no relationship. If you can't start by communicating, which is the basis of building a relationship, what do you have? You may have children, you may live in the same house, but you will be antagonistic, you will antagonize yourself with the other person all the time. So is it, you won't have what you're seeking, which is probably being happy. You won't be happy. You won't feel good. So why? Because you can't create that relationship. You see? Fundamentally. You can't create it because you can't communicate. See? So people when they're subjected to psychological consciousness, a woman thinks a certain way and a man thinks a certain way. You see?
I see. Yeah.
And how can you know, men don't listen, you know, and women always, in general, I'm talking about, and women are always complaining that men don't listen. What do they mean? They mean that they want to communicate. That's all they mean. They want to be listened to. In other words, they want to communicate. Women have a more subtle sense of relationship than men. Why? Because they need to be that way in order to make children and raise children. It's fundamental again. You see?
Yeah.
So they don't have the same difficulty to listen. Why? Because they live the principle of absorption. Look at their bodies, you know, it's like that. And men, they live the principle of emission. That's why they have a hard time listening to a woman, you see? Especially to a woman, even to men, but especially to women in a relationship. You see? Because they live that principle, they don't know it, you know. They always want to emit. They don't listen. They don't stop and absorb. You see? They're afraid to absorb because they're afraid to lose their masculinity, which is to emit. You see? They're so insecure that they can't do that. That's the problem with men. You see? And some women have a problem too. You know, they don't live totally their capacity of absorption. They're not aware of it. So they can't develop it. You see?
So, and also they have a hard time to express themselves.
Well, they...
a bit more than men, maybe.
They will express themselves, you know, but not necessarily in an adjusted way. They'll express themselves more emotionally, you know. Men too, you know. I consider men more emotional than women, you know, because they're not used to emotions like women are used to it. When men live their emotion, they are more weak to these emotions than women. Women will cry for an hour and then they're okay. What are we going to do today? You know what I mean? They're used to it.
Yeah.
They're tougher because of that. Men, you know, they live an emotion like a woman would live. They go nuts. Because they're not used to it. They restrain themselves from living their emotion like a woman. You see? It's not that emotions are adjusted to reality. That's not what I mean. You see?
Yes.
But I'm talking about what's going on. See?
Yeah.
And men think that they're not emotional. Their women are emotional. You know. Who's the most emotional? Subjected to emotion. You see? If they lose it when they have emotion, which one? Which one is stronger? You see? So, if you don't live enough your emotion, you can't manage them as easily.
So you're saying that women, because they express it easily, they got this capacity to deal with it a bit more than men. So they don't suffer as much.
Yeah, a big bit more. A big bit more.
Yeah, but
not just a bit more.
But you're saying, yeah. So you're saying that this, even though they got more experience than men in dealing with emotions, basically emotions still are not adjusted because we don't understand what's behind emotion. Is
Yeah,
it what you're saying?
it's not the emotion that is not adjusted. Emotions, what people call emotions, are interpretations of reality, a reality that they don't see, that they're not aware of. You see? So
yeah, could we go a little bit into emotions and how do we activate it, or how does that work?
a person, an individual has to make a difference between at one point, you have to make a difference between a vibration and emotion. Okay? To vibrate is normal. Okay? It's a part of surviving and all that, to feel something vibrating in us. Okay? So, but to live an emotion after that, if you separate, if you make a difference, is to interpret the vibration. In other words, you can't have emotion without reasons. You have to have justifications and reasons to believe the vibration or the feeling. A feeling is a vibration. Is being put in that or live a certain amount of vibrations in us. So when you do that, when you link those vibrations with reason, then you have an emotion, because you put importance or credibility to the feeling. But the feeling doesn't necessarily or directly has to do with the event that creates the vibration. In other words, the event triggers the program, which automatically puts the individual in a certain amount of a vibration. You see? From there...
This is where... Yeah.
Yes?
This is where people have a lot of trouble, because they're very used to have the impression to respond directly to the event in front of them. So
yeah, because
they always assimilate emotions to events.
Yeah, because it's very fast. You see, I'm separating time right now. You see? Yeah. You have the event that triggers the program. It's always like that. You can't vibrate because of an event only. Has to go through. So it triggers. Just a minute. It triggers the program, okay, or a program, and then you feel the vibration. In other words, what is the vibration? Why do we vibrate? Okay. Why does the event trigger a certain program? Because of survival. We're used to that. So we have a feeling, we feel something, we vibrate, and then the rest we interpret. You see? And it will look real. The justifications are always real. And that's the problem. You see? But it's the association with the feeling that's not real. Because the feeling comes from a program which is purely memory. So if you have very strong memories of being abandoned, well, then your feeling is overwhelming. So Is the feeling of being overwhelmed because of a event the reason? You see? The reason of your overwhelming feeling is the memory, what went on in your life. You see? That's the way it works.
So how can we, how can we at the beginning realize that it doesn't belong to the event? What's the clue?
It doesn't work like that. You have to experiment it. You have to be informed of the whole thing, and after a while, you will start to make a difference. Make the difference, depending on the strength of the memory. See? In other words, depending on resistance, the resistance you have. And the resistance comes from the credibility you put on memory or your feelings. Feelings. Pardon? Feelings are the same thing as thoughts. You know, you have the feeling, then it creates a thought. See? We only have the capacity of thought, of thinking. We don't create the thoughts, the form. It's the programs that create the form, or color thoughts. And we believe, or people believe, that they create the thought itself, the form itself. That's a problem. We don't create it. It's being created by our memories, by programs.
I see. Yeah.
Colored by programs.
So only a program can start the thoughts, basically. If we are vibrating to something, then the thought starts, and then just act naturally.
The what starts?
When there is an event and we connect to it, we are starting vibrating.
Well, we don't connect to it. The program connects to it first.
The program connects to it.
If you separate in time.
The program can start the source. Yeah.
The source.
The thought.
The thought. Okay. Well, there's an event, then it triggers a program. Then there's a feeling, automatically, and that feeling colors any thought that comes after that. See? It blinds you. It stops you from looking or observing reality. You only observe that reality. See? But your reasoning or the reason you will find can be very real. You see? The reason why you put importance to the feeling can be real, of course. The more real they are, the more importance you will give the feeling, and that's the problem. It doesn't work. It doesn't. It's not supposed to stick together. See, but because of a lack of consciousness from the person, then it sticks together. You see, it makes sense to them because they feel it. So they are identified to their feelings, to their thoughts, therefore to their programs, therefore to their memories. And their memories are associated or created by the fact that they are subjected to collective authority, collective consciousness. So where is the person in there? Where is the real person? It's nowhere. So people are looking to evolve and looking for a way out, but they don't know how. They don't even know what's going on. That's the problem. Talk about conspiracies. That's the worst one.
They try to find external solutions.
Of course, because they can't go internally, or very superficially. It's very superficial. Meditation is very superficial. See? It's more attitude than anything else. It will help the person to calm herself and all that, but it's very superficial. Has to be mental,
So it won't help discovering all the mechanics and
no.
Being more aware.
No.
So it seems that it's something that has to be constant. It has to be certain type of obstination to discover all these things. It can't be just a few days of observation and that's it.
No. Well, you have to suffer from it enough, so you develop a sufficient vigilance to observe in a different way. See? Otherwise you're going to suffer. So if you suffer from life, if you suffer psychologically, then it's because you're not adjusted enough. So once you know that, you have a criteria of observing things starting anyway. The result is this, so this means you're not adjusted enough. So look to why you're not adjusted. If you can't look by it yourself, well, you need somebody to see. And usually that's the way it is. You see, because it's too occult, it's too, the person is too blinded to that reality. He doesn't have the experience. He has the experience of psychological consciousness or an inferior consciousness. He doesn't have the experience of a superior consciousness. So he has to build it. First he has to be informed. Secondly, he has to live the experience slowly. He has to recognize things, experiment by himself and all that. And experiment with the other person. Experiment what? He has to experiment the capacity of observation, of multidimensional observation. When you talk to a person like me, where I observe things in a multidimensional way, all the time, most of the time, then you if you can follow that, you will experiment that kind of observation. Then after that you will start, once you've experimented enough, then you will start experimenting by yourself that capacity of observation, that superior capacity of observation. And then you will conform with the other person, and then you will go on and evolve like that. The more you will evolve, the more you will become autonomous at observing in that way. And then the more you observe in a multidimensional way, the more authority you have, of course, because it's your observation, not the other person's. See? And then you start building up your identity, your authority, therefore your identity. Because your identity is observation. Consciousness is observation. You see? So if you observe in a psychological way, well, your consciousness is psychological. If you observe in a multidimensional way, your consciousness has evolved to that superior consciousness. That's the way it works. So you have to gain the experience. It's not because you understand that it just pops up like that. It doesn't, never pops up. You know, and then it's finished. That's an illusion. That's a psychological illusion. That's looking at reality from a psychological perspective.
It has to be a development like anything else that we want to learn about.
You have to learn. How do we learn? We learn by experience. But the whole education criterion is to learn by accumulating knowledge, memory. It doesn't work like that. It's always a question of experience. Pardon?
Yeah, so believing that through knowledge we can evolve, it's an illusion.
Yeah, of course.
It's a belief.
It's a belief, yeah.
Because and it creates resistance to it, to all the process.
Of course. We're like a machine then. You know. Give data to a machine. You won't give that machine more than data. You know, it won't become conscious because he has more data. See?
Yeah. So it's all about experimenting it.
Pardon?
It's all about experimenting.
Yeah, of course.
Discovering through ourselves.
Your individual experiments. You see? That's all. Once you start doing that, but then you got to be sure you're doing that. A lot of people think, okay, I got to be autonomous. So they all in attitudes like that, but they're living that from a psychological consciousness. It's not the same thing. See? Has nothing to do with it. Autonomy, psychological autonomy, or the idea of autonomy, when you look at it from a psychological point of view, and when you look at it from a multidimensional point of view or a systemic point of view, it's not the same thing at all. Has nothing to do with it. That's where people make big mistakes.
I can see that,
yeah. Because they want to, you see, they want to evolve, but they want to bring all their baggage, their psychological baggage with them. You can't go. You can't go through the needle, you see. You got to go through the needle, naked. You know, alone and naked.
They try to be autonomous, but being still supported by the group and the collective consciousness.
And their knowledge. They think because they have knowledge that they're intelligent and they can. Has nothing to do with it. Has to do with a capacity of observation, of being able to observe in a different way, totally different way. That's where they make their big mistake. They're not evolved enough to understand it, so they stay there. Even if they think they're evolved, they're not. See? Even if they think they are awakened, they're not. It's mystical awakening or a psychological awakening, you know. And it's not multi-dimensional awakening. A human being has to know his mechanics, what's behind things. Otherwise, he can't liberate himself from it. You see, from program, from his life plan. You see. What is a life plan? It's the fact that an individual is identified to his programs. As long as he's identified to his memory and his programs, then he has a certain life plan. In other words, his future will be determined in a certain way. See? And he can't do anything about it. You see? Because of that. Once he becomes conscious of what's going on at the vibratory level, okay, then he can alter or make his life plan disappear. So he creates his future. You see? Otherwise, you can't evolve. You can't evolve if you can't create your future out of nothing, actually. See?
So, are you saying that as long as we don't understand perfectly, as long as we don't integrate how the system works, we have no way to alter the programs that are within us, so we are like automats. We don't have the capacity to do things by our own, through our own perception and understanding.
Yeah.
We are stuck with it.
Yeah. Exactly. That's why human beings are stuck. That's why human beings are stuck where they are stuck. You see? And they suffer from it. If you suffer, you're stuck. It's a simple equation. So, if you suffer from life, you're stuck somewhere. You're not free. You're only free when you're free from the influence of the collective authority, collective consciousness through your program. When you're free of your program, in other words, when you can have the will not to activate those programs through reason, okay, then you start becoming free. Other than that, you're not free, because you are chained to your memories, programs, automatism. So you're a little bit of a robot. Or a big bit of a robot. And you don't know it. You think you're free.
So thinking different means that there's a resistance to it, to accept all these things. The only belief that we have identity and that we can choose whatever we want becomes a resistance to all these informations you're giving, right?
Exactly. You see? Until you put doubt in that, in the way you think, then you can't, you're not open to anything. You're closed, you have too much resistance. Why? Because you as a person supports that. You have the power. See? Not the programs. You have the power. The programs or the system just uses your power against you, in other words. Because you are ignorant of what's going on. You see? You don't know what's going on. So once you know start to know what's going on, it's a rebirth. You see? You think you were alive before, now you become alive. You see? You're born into that reality. It's the thing about the red pill and the blue pill. People keep taking the blue pill all the time. They're colorblind. They got to take the red pill and absorb it. See? The matrix is the system, the programs, and all that. You gotta be able to manipulate the system. Not only the system manipulate you. Man today is being manipulated by the system. He doesn't know. See? He's totally manipulated. Becoming awakened is to be able to know what's going on in order not to be manipulated by the system. If you're manipulated by certain program, not all, but all programs actually, and especially programs which are not adjusted to reality, then you're being manipulated in a very strong way, And you ask yourself, why is life so hard? Why am I suffering from life and all that? It's because you don't know what's going on. You see? That's the conspiracy against man. But it's not a conspiracy, it's just the fact that he's ignorant of it. He doesn't know. He absolutely doesn't know what's going on. See? Until he knows what's going on, or starts to know what's going on, and he can't know by himself what's going on. That's the problem. He needs somebody to tell him. And then it starts. See? That's the way it works. Takes one, and then two, and then three. That's the way it works. Parents are supposed to facilitate the development, the development of the conscience of the child. But that's not what they do. See? Because they are prisoners themselves, they transfer that consciousness. They influence or impose to the child the authority they are subjected to. You see? So the child has no choice. Otherwise, he gets rejected from the parents. And for a child to feel rejected, talk about relationship, the need for relationship, he needs his parents to have a sense of survival. Otherwise, he'll die. Certain children in wars and certain wars were left without relationship with a woman or their mother, and they died because of a lack of being held or whatever. They died. So relationship for a child is crucial. Crucial. And if the parents impose their authority, then automatically the child will feel rejected, because he has to abandon his own authority, or the very little he has, to accept the authority of the parents, to be accepted by the parents, and to feel a little bit secure. And that starts the whole ball game, the fear of being abandoned, the fear of being rejected, which everybody lives, at a certain point or another.
It seems that as long as these fears are there, we can't deal with them. We can't get back our identity and authority, because we are always in our relationship. We have to deal with it, and being stuck with this need for security. And
you try to secure yourself through the other, you see? In the sense that, does the other love you? You see? So, if you depend on the other in that sense, you're stuck. You see? You'll suffer. Because the other person will act sometimes in a certain way where there's not much love. You see? They can't sustain that all the time. But in a relationship where the two persons are sufficiently aware, sufficiently awakened, then they'll build up their relationship, you see. They'll have trust. They'll trust each other more. See? Not blindly. Because the person acts in a certain way, appreciates you, and shows that appreciation. You see? They can relate. So it creates a lot of complicity, creates a lot of communication. It needs to be fed through communication. Not bullshit. You know what I mean? Not games like most relationships.
I give you a little bit, you give me a little bit. If you don't give me, I hate you.
Exactly.
I reject
exactly.
you.
Exactly. Yeah.
All these bad games.
Yeah, exactly. So how can you build a relationship based on that? Really?
I can see. Yeah.
But the people have the need, so they stay in that kind of relationship and they suffer from it. And they change, they separate themselves, they start another relationship and live the same experience. Which is more intense or less intense? Usually more intense. You know, until they realize that they don't have to live a relationship like that. It's not the way it works. It's supposed to work anyway.
It seems that some people can go away from it. They live through this experience all their life and nothing's changed. They're suffering from it, whatever, but nothing changes.
Yeah, because they don't know any better. That's all. They'll know at the moment they die. They'll realize that it's futile. Because when you die, just before you die, you detach yourself from memory. And at that moment, you will realize all that. But it's too late. That's what people live when they die and they come back. See?
Yeah.
The experience is the detachment from a memory. Which a person that awakens, that's what they live. You see? They die to their psychological consciousness, they're born to their multidimensional consciousness. Same thing.
But is it progressive, this awakening, or is it at once? Because it seems like when you drop this identity, then the other one arrives.
Yeah, but it's progressive. It's progressive. It's not boom boom. You know.
Yeah.
If it was like that, it's even when it's progressive, it's not evident. You know, it's a little bit hard because of the insecurity it creates. You know, because the person is used to securing themselves through their psychological consciousness or through their intellect. The more the intellect is developed, the more insecurity there is. Because the development of the intellect is based on insecurity. The energy comes from that.
Yeah. So even awakening is not perfect experience. It's just the first experiment of being free from the old identity, which is memory.
Yeah, but it's gradual. It's gradual, and you become more and more and more free. You know, the more you separate yourself, the more there's distance between you and psychological consciousness, and more with a superior consciousness. Then you become more freer and freer. It's progressive. It's a process. You know. It's not like you meditate and then you awaken, you know.
Yes.
all of a sudden. It doesn't work like that.